The rain was coming down sideways, a cold April shower that made the neon signs on the boulevard bleed into the wet asphalt. It was well past midnight in this concrete jungle, and I was in my office, the only sound the persistent drumming of rain and the occasional sputter from my old coffee percolator. But the cases never sleep in this city, and tonight was no exception. 4 of them, each one a serious incident, each one demanding my full attention. I grabbed my trench coat, ready to hit the rain-slicked streets and walk the digital beat. The first one was a doozy, a case involving the HTTP headers plugin for WordPress. The vulnerability, known as CVE-2026-4132 with a CVSS score of 7.2, was a remote code execution flaw that had my attention. Technically, it was a case of external control of file name or path, a classic CVE-73 scenario. The attacker would send a specially crafted request to the login handler, exploiting the lack of proper validation on the passwd path option. This allowed them to upload malicious files and execute arbitrary code on the server, a serious breach that could lead to data theft or worse. The scope and impact were significant, affecting all versions up to and including 1.19.2. Given the widespread use of the plugin, the potential for damage was high, with attackers gaining full control over the server. Remediation was clear. Upgrade to version 1.20 or later. In the meantime, disabling the plugin or restricting access to the login handler could serve as a temporary fix. System administrators and security teams needed to act fast, and vigilance was key. Monitoring for unusual file uploads or unexpected processes was essential. But that wasn't the only body on the slab tonight. The next file that landed on my desk was about OwnTone server, versions 28.4 through 29.0. This one was labeled CVE-2026-41458, another serious case with a CVSS score of 8.2. It involved a race condition vulnerability in SRDAP login handler, a weakness that could bring the server to its knees. The attack chain was straightforward. The attacker would flood the DAP login endpoint with concurrent requests, exploiting unsynchronized access to the global DP session list, and this would lead to a denial of service condition, effectively shutting down the server. The impact was severe, as it could disrupt the entire music streaming service. Affected versions ranged from 28.4 to 29.0, and given the popularity of OwnTone, the potential for widespread service disruption was real. Remediation involved upgrading to version 29.1 or later. In the interim, rate limiting the DAAP ASA login endpoint or implementing stronger session management controls could mitigate the risk. Network administrators and security teams needed to be on high alert, with monitoring of DAAP traffic for unusual spikes in requests being crucial for early detection. I barely had time to light another cigarette when the next file landed on my desk. This time it was about threat sonar anti-ransomware developed by Team T5. The vulnerability, CVE-2026-5966, had a CVSS score of 8.1 and involved an arbitrary file deletion flaw. Technically, it was a path traversal issue where authenticated remote attackers with web access could delete arbitrary files on the system. The attack chain was as simple as it was devastating. The attacker would send a request containing directory traversal sequences to the web interface, exploiting insufficient input validation to access and delete files outside the intended directory. The scope and impact were concerning, as it could lead to data loss and system instability. Affected versions were all those prior to the current build, and given the critical role of anti-ransomware software, the potential for harm was significant. Remediation involved updating to the latest version of Threat Sonar Anti-Ransomware. As a workaround, restricting web access to the software or implementing strict input validation could help. System administrators and security teams needed to act swiftly, with file access monitoring and regular backups being essential for mitigation and recovery. The night was far from over. The last case was about VWeb, a content management system prior to version 1.08.1. This one was labeled CVE-2026-41457, a privilege escalation vulnerability with a CVSS score of 8.8. Technically, it was a case of improper access control, where authenticated users could modify privilege fields on their own profile. The attack chain was straightforward. The attacker would inject role ID 1 into profile, save requests to escalate to super administrator privileges. This could grant them unauthorized access to sensitive functions and data. The scope and impact were serious, affecting all versions prior to 1.0.8.1. VVVVB was widely used, so the potential for unauthorized access was high. Remediation was clear. Upgrade to version 1.0.8.1 or later. In the interim, monitoring profile save requests for role ID modifications could help detect and prevent unauthorized escalations. Website administrators and security teams needed to be proactive, with regular audits of user roles and permissions being crucial for maintaining system integrity. As I closed the last file, the rain outside seemed to ease up a bit, but in the digital underworld, it never really stops. These cases were a stark reminder of the constant battle between security and those who seek to exploit it. For the defenders, the message was clear: stay vigilant, stay updated, and never stop fighting the good fight. This is Jack Cypher signing off from the rain-soaked streets of the digital city, always on the beat and always watching. Remember, in the world of cybersecurity, it's not just about catching the criminals, it's about keeping the innocent safe from harm.